Yeah, it's not the best.
Is that our sound check?
Yeah, we're recording at least.
Cool.
Do you have an iPad for me?
I Let me go get one.
Yeah, can I get one from you too, please?
We might not have
Okay.
I'll get it on my phone.
I printed everything out. That was.
I printed them all out. I have a kills my print.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the Garden City Planning and Zoning Commission. It's May 18th, 2022, and we're calling the meeting to order now. As far as roll call, this is nice. The whole group is here this evening in person. So Commissioner Shepard, Commissioner Brown, Commissioner Montoya, and Commissioner Wild are all in the room. We will do the Pledge of Allegiance next, so please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for the staff, are there any changes to the agenda this evening?
Chairman, none by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well then we'll jump right into the consent agenda. Right now, the consent agenda contains the minutes from our last meeting, which was April 20th, 22. And there are 3 items that have been continued to a later date. So the first one is sub FY 2022-2, Honcik Townhomes Subdivision. The date certain for the continuance of that one is June 15th, 2022. The second one, sub FY 2022-3, Binnion Subdivision. The same date for the continuance of a date certain of June 15th, 2022. And then the other is a sub FY 2022-4. That will be continued to the date certain of July 20th, 2022. And then from time to time, we also will add we can add other items on the docket for tonight to the consent agenda. There is one that I wanted to see if there is one of the items on the agenda tonight that can be moved over to the consent agenda. So in order to do that, I have questions I ask of the applicant and of staff and of the commission. The first one is, this is for item A under public hearings, sub FY 2020-1, Mountain View Townhomes, combined preliminary final plat processed as a planned unit development. David Hale with Hale Development is requesting a residential subdivision consisting of 58 residential lots and 6 common lots located at 130 West 53rd Street. So is there anyone in the audience that wanted to give public testimony on that item? In addition to the applicant. Okay, that would be a no. And is the applicant present?
Yes.
Okay, please state your name for the record.
David Hale.
Okay, have you had the opportunity to review the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and draft decision, including draft conditions of approval? Okay, do you agree and consent to these documents in the affirmative, including all conditions of approval?
Not all of them, no.
Okay, we will hear that one then. Thank you very much. Right. And then that was really it. So the consent agenda for whoever does the motion among the commission does contain the minutes and those first three items listed under the approval of minutes. So B, C, and D. So at this time, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wild.
just a note that I missed the April meeting, so I'll have to abstain from the minutes approval, but I will be voting in the affirmative on the other items for approval to continue.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Brown.
I move approval of the consent agenda consisting of the minutes of April 20th, 2022, subdivision FY 2022 number 2, subdivision FY 2022 number 3, subdivision FY 2022 number 4.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so our consent agenda has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that? Okay. We'll move to the next item on the agenda.
Probably ought to vote.
Oh, sorry, we do need to vote. Man, we need to be kept in line up here. So all those in favor of the consent agenda approval, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Okay, let's try this again. Now we will move to the next item on the agenda. Subdivision FY 2021-10 Petra Point Townhomes Combined Preliminary Final Plat processed as a planned unit development. Craig Kolchak is requesting a residential subdivision consisting of 9 residential units and 1 common lot at 4900 Allworth Street. So for this particular item, we're going to do a little bit different order than we typically do. I'm going to have the staff do their presentation first, and then we'll have the applicant come up and do their presentation after that. So that said, we'll turn it over to staff and we'll hear their presentation.
Hannah, this was on old business. Was there a previous public hearing? And it's been set over to this?
Yes, so this subdivision 2021-10 has been continued multiple times since about November, December.
Okay.
Just because it's been at design review, having to go back and change the site plan so many times that we just haven't presented it here yet.
Thanks.
So good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Since this submission of this subdivision was originally in September, and we have seen so many different renditions of the site plan, landscape plans, and all the submissions, I would like to try and clarify and at least summarize the ongoing discussion that staff, the design review committee, the applicant, and now planning and zoning commission has had over the last several months trying to get this application to where it is today. So first of all, the application has decreased by 1 townhome unit. Originally, it was a proposal for 8 townhome units, which is now gone down to 7. The removal of the 1 townhome unit has allowed for a common open space area to be included. In this picture that you see on my presentation, it's in the top left-hand corner. It includes a picnic table area, a lawn, grassy area, as well as 2 guest parking spaces. In the staff report, I have highlighted the fact that while common open space is provided, the exact details as to how much, as in like how much square footage is provided, is not included on any of the site plans, landscape plans, or any of the details that which were submitted. So I wasn't able to thoroughly examine if it does meet code requirements or not. But I have conditioned in the drafted decision document to make sure that there is 10% common open space within the subdivision. While that is conditioned, it is concerning that it does have to be a condition only in that once the subdivision comes back to staff at a construction plan level review, so not in front of you guys, it's already been approved, but later, if it doesn't meet that 10% requirement, a site redesign might have to happen, in which case that the application would probably have to come back through the entire entitlement process with that redesign of the property to accommodate that common open space. Originally, the subdivision did not propose any guest parking. However, with that common open space being provided, there are 2 on-site guest parking now, or parking spaces now provided. Waivers to parking code standards have been requested. The waivers have indicated that the applicant wishes to have 8 of the 16 required enclosed parking spaces within a garage, so half of the requirement, with the remaining 8 in the drive aisle. There's also a waiver to the guest parking spaces. So with the amount of units being provided, there is a requirement of 4 guest parking spaces. Technically, it's 3.5, but in that instance, we've rounded up to 4 guest parking spaces, and they're only providing the 2. So they're deficient 1.5 or 2 guest parking spaces. And these have been drafted as waivers in the condition decision document. It is assumed that without adequate guest parking on site, the overflow of guest parking would require guests to go to either 49th Street to the east, 50th Street to the west, as Allworth does not allow for any on-street parking in this location. And I would also like to note a correction that needs to be made in the drafted decision document regarding the guest requirement. On page 22, it states that the waiver is asking for 0 guest parking spaces. That was a previous version of the waiver before those 2 guest parking spaces were provided on site. So that just needs a little update. And then there's the conversation of the trash services. The applicant has requested that trash services from Republic Services be provided along Allworth Street and has submitted photos in their packet that show that it is common practice for the developments along Allworth and Adams Street to be serviced off of Allworth and Adams. Staff has advised against this particular type of cart service since the pre-application phase of this particular application, due to the potential conflicts between the trash carts being serviced, the trucks that are servicing them, and all the other users of Allworth Street. The proposal for the trash receptacles being picked up along North Allworth is detrimental to the safety of those utilizing the street. The nature of the vehicular, the bicycle, and the pedestrian traffic will conflict with the service trucks along Allworth, especially during those pickup times. And there could potentially be at least 14 trash carts. If we're considering trash, recycling, perhaps compost, we could get more than just the 14 trash and recycle bins out there based off of the 7 townhome units. Republic Services has also provided a agency comment. Within their agency comment, they provided 3 different alternatives. The first and most preferred one of Republic Services being that those trash carts be serviced on site within the development instead of on Allworth Street. Just for Republic Services, they found that to be the most efficient and the safest option of picking up the trash carts. As Allworth continues to develop and see more traffic, new developments in Garden City should not utilize this main corridor of Adams and Allworth Street. Instead, the application should find a solution and be required to provide on-site trash pickup services. And if you look at the last 3 to 4 years of development within Garden City along this street, you'll find that all the subdivisions and even the multifamily developments provide some kind of on-site common drive trash pickup. So the design review committee also has requested that the applicant return with updated site plans concerning or addressing their concerns regarding the on-site trash pickup request, or in other terms, not providing the trash receptacles on site. And so this application will be going to the design review committee on June 6th, 2022. So here in a few weeks to discuss this particular item. And lastly, there's the pedestrian pathway. So originally the application came to us at the city without the proposal of a 12-foot wide easement with a 10-foot wide paved pedestrian pathway. This pathway has been conditioned in the decision document, and it's also been updated within the submittal packet. So the applicant has acknowledged that condition, despite it being still a condition in the decision document. We just want to make sure that it is there, it is constructed. The applicant has designated 7 feet of their property on the eastern side to be part of that public pedestrian bike path easement, as well as coordinating with their adjacent western neighbor to provide for 5 feet. So in total, it's a 12-foot wide public easement, 10-foot wide paved pathway. It'll connect from the sidewalk of Allworth Street to the north of River Point Subdivision, which is also in construction right now. They're providing a 10-foot wide public pedestrian easement to which then connects to River Apartments, which has already been constructed, and they have the 10-foot wide pathway. So in all, between the 3 developments, we'll have a really connected inner neighborhood network for the public to utilize and reach from Allworth to the Greenbelt and vice versa. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Any questions for staff?
I have a couple questions.
Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chairman, Hannah, thank you very much. I have a question. It's about what I think is the big issue is having to do with the trash service. The 2 developments that are directly to the north from this development that they came off of 49th Street and not off of Allworth. And those are the Legacy Apartments and River Point Subdivision. River Point is under construction as we speak. To your knowledge, how are the trash service for those two developments?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown. The Legacy Apartments is an apartment complex, so therefore they have a common shared trash enclosure to which Republic Services enters the development and goes to those few trash enclosures and picks up the dumpster and handles the trash that way. The River Point subdivision, just to the north of this property, has a common drive with a few townhomes on it as well. But they have the trash carts going out onto the common drive. And the subdivision itself has accommodated for a hammerhead turnaround in the center of their subdivision. So if you look at this site plan, it's going to be off canter a little bit, but the way this common drive is proposed essentially would line up with where the end of the hammerhead exists of River Point to the north.
Thank you. I realize that you had this in your briefing, but I would like for you to still answer this question. To your knowledge, along Allworth, which is actually an extension of Adams, there's a break point there that causes that. What I would characterize as newer developments, let's say last 15 years, are there any developments along there that are serviced by a private street or by a driveway like this is going to be done with this, that have their trash receptacles taken out on Allworth or on to Adams?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown, no, not to my knowledge. And I did do a pretty extensive deep dive into what is along Adams and Allworth in the last 3 to 4 years. Like I had mentioned in my presentation, everything is being serviced off of their own common drive, their own private drive, not utilizing Adams or Allworth Street for the trash pickup.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions for staff?
Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Montoya.
And I noticed that on one of the site plans, it looks like along, I believe, 49th, there is an identification of additional parking spots on the frontage of that road. Is that just on the public right-of-way street side?
I would have to look at that site plan again. I did not recognize that in the submittal document.
So it called out 4 additional parking spaces. I just didn't know if those were counted in the.
Right, so if they are identified in the most recent site plan, and if it is concluded that we can count those as 2 additional guest parking spaces, then that would meet the guest parking requirement. The waiver would not be required, and they would be compliant with the guest parking requirements.
So we don't know whether that's been shown or.
I would have to look at the material
Okay,
here real quick.
okay, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. You good? Thank you,
Thank
Hannah.
you.
All right, the applicant, Craig Kolchak, your turn, sir.
Okay.
You have 15 minutes, just as staff did. I should have mentioned that at first.
Way too much time. I've got
You could, if you could just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just.
Craig Kolchak. I represent Petra Point. My address is 4839 Mountain View Drive,
Perfect. Thank
Boise,
you.
Idaho.
Okay. Good, thank you.
I've got a thumb drive here with some photographs and a video. Would that be possible to?
We can do that. I don't know.
So there's a file on here called Petra Point Trash.
Oh,
Go to the top.
Oh. Which one do you want?
Let's start out with 45th and Adams.
Back to Zoom. So every time you want to change the PDF, we're gonna have to stop the
Yeah,
share.
Sorry. Okay. To kind of fill in the blanks on new developments, this project is on 45th Street. It's Flourish Townhomes. The developer is NeighborWorks of Boise. I purchased this property for them and they finished this property as far as the infrastructure up, I believe, in 2021. They just finished the last building this year. Every one of these buildings is serviced off of Allworth Street and 45th Street. And you take a look right here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 13 trash cans in front there. If you take a look at the street, you can see an oncoming car. And I'm parked, a little Land Rover here is parked in the median. I had a chance to pull over one of Garden City's policemen, and I asked him, has there ever been an issue or a complaint for impeding traffic or anything when it comes to trash pickup? He said no. And this is hearsay, granted. This has been going on for decades. This is a brand new development here. I've got another development down on 43rd Street that I didn't take a look at, but it also has pickup in the street. I've got another development on 40th Street that has room to put a street on there, so we have pickup on a private drive. I've got another development over on 48th Street that's on, or 38th Street that's on 38th, and they dump it on the street. There's 3 townhomes over there. I've got another development, Village Oak, that's off of 36th Street, which would be Overland or Orchard. And they have the room to drive around. Everybody puts their trash cans on the street, but from basically 51st Street all the way down to 40th Street, everybody on the street on both sides puts their trash cans out in front, unless there's an access point and a private drive that has the ability to drive around. The development that I have on the development side, the actual size of the property is 0.63 acres. And I think you've got a photograph of the landscaping plan. That landscaping plan includes the home. I was trying to do a land split, but they wouldn't let me do that and develop the property. So I had to include the residential residents on the development for the PUD. And you are correct when you notice there's 4 additional parking spaces on 49th Street. That's part of the development, as the development includes the residential unit. We're also including on our landscaping, part of the landscape issues there, we've had to add a couple trees on that property to adhere to the comprehensive plan requirements for plantings. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we are. I've got another video, but I think this pretty much explains that there are new developments that do have street trash cans on the front. If you take a look at where the trash cans are put, this walkway here is a 5-foot walkway. There's 2 feet of ornamental brick. It's fake, but it's colored concrete that's pressed into brick. That section of sidewalk there is intended for street signs. It's intended for mailboxes if they are on there, power poles, and according to ACHD, trash cans. That the reason that there's not a full imprint of brick along there is that this allows impediments along the sidewalk, and you still have a clear pathway for pedestrian traffic. So the pedestrian traffic is not impeded by the location of the garbage cans. So that's my spiel on the garbage cans. That's my spiel on the on-site parking. I've submitted that to staff, and for Hannah not to see that, that's not an issue, because we've submitted multiple submittals to this over the past 1.5 years to try to get this thing to go through. I'm up for questions.
Okay, questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir. Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chairman, let me refer to this picture. I'm going to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Okay. What street is that we're looking at?
Well, this is Adams Street. The street down where the car is, the crossroad is 45th.
This is Adams. This is not 45th Street. This is on Adams.
Yes, on Adams Street. When I said 45th Street, if you take a look at the car that's in that picture facing us, that's the intersection of 45th and Adams
So these are actually
on Adams
on
Street.
the collector street,
Yes.
which is Adams or Alworth. Is that true of the others that you mentioned? Are they collected on the numbered streets, the trash bins, or are they on the collector street, which is Adams?
43rd is on the collector street. 40th is not. They have their own turnaround and a driveway, and it's like 2 acres, so it's a good sized property. We're talking about, I got one more thing too. Hannah? Can I get your assistance again? Sorry. I've got the letter from Republic Trash Collection on this disc as well. Sorry for being such a knucklehead here. Picture point trash pick. Okay. I go up and down. Okay. So Bill sent me a letter because I asked about trash pickup on Alworth Street. And I'll just read it out to you. Good morning, Hannah and Craig. Thank you both for your time at Petra Point Project. There's some thoughts for picking up the trash safely and efficiently at this location as it's currently drawn. The safest and most efficient, that'd be the number one choice, would be to have them pull off Alworth Street, have a no parking lane turnaround at the end of the street, and service the other side of the street on our way back to the property. This is a way our trucks could be off the busy street while providing service. The street that we have in there, I believe, is 25 feet wide. If we put a turnaround in there, that'd cut the property in half because it's only 98 feet deep. The second way for us to service the property would be involved a dumpster. And a dumpster is kind of it's great when you have a lot of space, but it's kind of intrusive when you've got a small space and smelly and crappy. And so for this to be feasible, we'd need a hammerhead turnaround again for the property because they pick up the dumpster, and that's just not feasible with the size of a property. But they give us a third option, which is to provide service to the property in a manner which is presented on the drawing, and the drawing shows that the case residents would have to bring their trash carts out to Alworth Street, and we would provide residential cart pickup there. There was no objection to that. They gave us 3 options. We chose the third, which was the most conducive to the site that we have and the limitations of size and depth. So, the Republic guys are good with it.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question. Sir, could you put the other picture back?
Uh-oh.
It's a good thing we have Hannah.
My lovely assistant here.
Oh, no.
It's okay.
It's a good thing that one of
This
us
one?
doesn't have to try and do it.
That one?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Brown.
These developments, they're not serviced though off of a common entry for all of them. Each one has a separate. Is that correct?
There's an entry, and unfortunately it doesn't show this. This is part of a 4-piece townhome, the first unit here. This unit here. You see this pointer? There's a drive that goes down to the north. There's garages that are separate that service the rest of these buildings to the west or to the east, but it's not a turnaround. It's just a straight deal. So they can't turn around there. That's why they put them on the street. On the other end, of the north end, there's a series of duplexes and one other fourplex that's access to that piece. That's a 20-foot drive. There's no turnaround there either. It's not available. And like I said, I can't remember when I purchased the property, but we developed the property and finished it up in 20 and 21.
All right. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Montoya?
So you heard me ask the question about the parking. Can you
Yes.
explain that a little bit and what your intention is? Is it just on street you're dedicating to the?
And yeah, and the reason being is that's part of our development. It's, you know. Hey, Hannah, could you pull up the big landscape plan that shows the house and the development?
Yeah, and I found the plat submittal
With
with the parking.
Okay.
So I guess that's
If
why
you
I
want
imagine So
that
it's
one.
18. So,
Would you want the plat or do you want the landscape?
The landscape plan, that's.
Okay.
more
The most recent
visual.
one.
Okay. Thank you so much. I know you big time.
That's okay.
Okay, so. So this entire project is Tetra Point, including the resident. I wasn't able to separate the townhomes with a minor land division because if I did, I wouldn't be able to develop the property for some reason. So we ended up doing a PUD on the entire thing. So the resident is part of this development. With those 4 units that you took a look at, Mr. Montoya, those are, you know, that section of the street is frontage on our property. That's part of our property. And that's why we put the 4 parking spaces there.
So it'd be within your boundary line?
Yeah.
And is there going to be signage or anything?
Yeah, there will be guest parking signage there as well. You know, we had to back that off a little bit because right on the intersection of 49th and Allworth, there's a stop sign right there. So you need to be back 20 feet from there. So from 20 feet back is when we started the parking. We moved it back.
So that would add an additional 4 spaces to the.
Additional 4 spaces, which, you know, Hannah mentioned we only needed 3.5 spaces. That'll give us 6 spaces, and that more than complies with the requirement for the parking.
It might be helpful for the other commissioners to see that because we don't get a good view there.
Yeah, we're blocking everything right here, you know?
Thank you.
You bet.
Further questions for the applicant?
Can I move it? Oh, look at that. So there we have
Oh,
it.
there we go.
So, and now I owe 2 people lunch. Right about this point here is where the stop sign is. There's a ped ramp right here. So the stop sign's here. Our parking is in this area here. And this entire project is Tetra Point.
That's what I was asking.
So you can see on the landscaping plan, we've added another landscaping tree that was required here. There's also, I believe, total percentage of open space across the entire project is 29.7%. Total percentage of open space on improvement lot is 25.8%. But my understanding is that part of the setback, we're not allowed to include that as open space, even though it is. And you can see lawn in front of each unit. That's common lot stuff. Is there any other questions?
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yay, thanks, guys.
The way our flow goes here is you're actually, oh no, we're going to do a public hearing now. If there's anybody in the audience or on Zoom that wanted to provide public testimony for this application, this is the time. Anybody in the room? Anybody on Zoom? Okay, I'll take that as a no and neither. So the next step in the process, yep, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say, you're up as rebuttal, so you're free to come back up and have another chunk of time. So if you could come up though.
Want me to say my name again?
Yeah.
Okay. So the development to the north of us, they have 8 townhomes in that development as well. But that development is twice the size on property size that we are. So they have the availability to have a turnaround there and still have the 8 units. You know, with this deal here, we had 8 units. We took one of the units out to add additional landscaping requirements based on the comprehensive plan and 2 parking spaces. So, you know, by the limits of what we had to do with the trash pickup, putting a turnaround in there would basically get rid of 4 units, and it just wouldn't make any sense to even develop that property. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. Okay.
Further questions for the applicant based on that new information? Nope, you're good. Oh, Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you, Commissioner. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So, and I heard you talk about the measurements and how it was like 98 feet
From
back.
front to back.
So you're saying like you can't take out that last one that was up there. So there would only be 6 or some other formulation. There's
So-
no way you can.
So part of the
reduce
deal
it.
with the turnaround is that they require a no parking. So the parking that we gained from the development that we had would eliminate those 2 parking spaces. Granted, we have more, but it'd be nice to have on-site parking. And by putting in the turnaround, you can't have cars parked there because they wouldn't be able to turn around.
Right.
So that would eliminate the additional spaces that we took out one of our units to put that in, and would also eliminate the percentage of open space because we can't count pavement. So it would be, you know, a double indemnity there with losing parking spaces and losing landscaping.
I guess my question is just so you've looked at all of the options for like changing around the configuration, and that's what you're like.
Yeah. I've looked at everything possible that we could do, but if we do what you suggested, then we're in another issue with open space and parking. So, and the fact that, you know, I hate to say this, but everybody else is doing it on Allworth and Adams Street, and there's even new developments that are doing that. I just think that we should be able to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Okay, so at this point, we will close the public hearing and we'll move to a discussion amongst the commission members. So we'll start with Commissioner Brown. Your thoughts?
I'm really in a little bit of a quandary there where when I saw the development, I jotted down here. And I do want to commend the developer for the applicant. I think that they did a lot for satisfying some problems that I personally had with it by taking out the 1 unit, which, as he points out, it enables them to meet other requirements that we have about landscaping and common area, which otherwise he couldn't do that. He did that. And the next area was, I want to say there were two areas that are of concern. One was the guest parking. And when you look at it, since it does include the house and it does give them the option of putting some additional parking places out there on 49th Street, that is, I'm satisfied about that. And that leads us to the big one that we're talking about, and that is the garbage pickup, how you can do it. And what the gentleman says is correct, and I'm fairly knowledgeable about the street. It's the only collector street on the old part of Garden City. All of Garden City south of the river, Allworth and Adams which are essentially the same street. That's the only collector street, and that's why it's not allowed. There's not any parking. The parking was taken off at one time before we rebuilt Adams Street, and I was the engineer that built it. Before we rebuilt all of Adams Street east of here, there was parking. It was a real nightmare, and we had a hard time, but that was the rule, and that's not going to change. It is a collector street, and there's not going to be ever going to be parking on it. And so that leaves us with this situation. And at first I was thinking, wow, maybe we really should require him to do like what the others are for 49th Street do. But I also, when look at it, my knowledge tells me he's exactly correct. If we required him to go down there and put a hammerhead in, then it would eliminate the parking, which we already said was a problem, and he solved that part by taking out a unit. It would eliminate much of the common space that's required, because that wouldn't account, that would be a hammerhead, and it wouldn't be allowed to have parking. And they sketched in where that would be. I think he's right if we make him do that. So we're back to if we want to have this development, which I think would be a nice development, and certainly be an improvement over what used to be down there. And so I'm persuaded that I would support this and let them pick up trash bins out there. And it's lucky that we do have a requirement, and it is a requirement that be a separated sidewalk. That's what gives you the brick places, the stamped concrete place where they can put them. So it's not like they're going to be out in the street. We saw where it goes, and it's not going to block the sidewalk. It's a little bit unsightly, but I'm persuaded that I would support it given what has been done.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Shepherd, any thoughts?
I did have the thought that if they removed that last townhouse, it might be more feasible, but after hearing what you said, it doesn't sound like it would be. And after hearing what Commissioner Brown said, I'm leaning towards agreeing with him. I want to see the development go forward and to see more housing come in. And also the fact that the sidewalk does have that separation there. I was concerned about bicyclists, but it's so close to the green belt. I imagine most bicyclists probably are taking the green belt, but it is a hard one because it's unsightly. It is a bit dangerous on those days for bicyclists. So. But those are my thoughts on it. So thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Montoya.
I agree with Commissioners Brown and Shepherd.
Commissioner Wild.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. Commissioner Brown has articulated well this kind of domino effect between the trash and the parking. So I think this is a pretty good balance. I appreciate the additional records, which probably need to go into the record. The photograph that he showed, the email from Republic Services probably needs to be in the record because it does list this as an option. The third of 3 options, but still an option. And then there was one other record that showed the parking on 49th. So those probably all need to be in the record. But I too am supportive and think this is a good compromise.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners. I think we are ready for a motion on this one.
Spaces. It's in the final document.
So is it, would it still be away without?
But still would, because of those.
So what we're just discussing up here is just wanted to verify that the parking is in the decision document and the draft decision documents. And let's see. So there's something on 22, right? Page 22.
22 at the top of my draft. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Wild,
I would move for approval of Petra Point Townhomes SUB FY 2021-10. Based upon the findings of fact and conclusions of law as part of our packet, including a waiver of the required parking. Is that sufficient?
do we have a second?
Second motion.
Okay, Commissioner Montoya has seconded. All those in favor of this application, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any no nays then? So we are approved, sir. Or let me state for clarity's sake, this will be now, we are a recommending body. So this goes to city council now for their approval. So we're recommending to city council that they approve it, is what you're saying.
Sorry. That should have been my motion. I move to recommend.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item. It's under public hearings. Item A, subdivision FY 2020-1. Mountain View Townhomes combined preliminary final plat process as a planned unit development. David Hale with Hale Development is requesting a residential subdivision consisting of 58 residential lots and 6 common lots located at 130 West 53rd Street, Ada County. Parcel is listed in the mixed use zoning district. So I'm going to quickly run through, I should have done this before that first one, but how the flow of these presentations go. So always a brief introduction by the chair. The applicant will present, 15-minute time limit. City staff then presents, 15-minute time limit. We do a public hearing. If there's any public testimony, there's a 3-minute time limit per person. And then at that point, the applicant can come back up and provide rebuttal testimony. At that point, we close the public hearing and we move to a discussion amongst the commission members and then hopefully render a decision. Now, for this particular item, this is another situation where we are a recommending body. So what we're doing here tonight is providing a recommendation to city council. So all that said, you're up. And then yes, name and address, please, once you get to the mic.
Good evening, Chairman Rasmussen, commission members. My name is David Hale. My address is 116 South 23rd Street. I'm here tonight requesting a modification to the previously approved plan unit development of the Mountain View Townhomes Subdivision. First, I'd like to give you a brief history of this property, as I think it provides some insight as to the challenges that's faced in this specific location. This location is bordering Garden City boundaries. It butts up to Settlers Canal and Boise City property. Back in 2014, my partner received planning and zoning approval for a 96 unit apartment project. That apartment project had ingress and egress access onto Glenwood. West 53rd Street at the time was a dirt road. ACHD conditioned that project for 53rd Street to be paved. No curb, gutter, sidewalk, landscaping was required. After the approval, a couple days prior to city council, there was an ACHD commissioner that brought up the issue of the ingress and egress into that difficult intersection. It's actually just north of the intersection of Glenwood and Goddard. And upon council's review in that hearing, they approved the project, but conditioned ACHD's recommendation or request to have the ingress and egress removed from that intersection. And that tabled the project. That project did not come to fruition. I came before planning and zoning at the start of 2020 with a new project. In 2019, a property owner on West 53rd decided to make improvements to his property. My partner and this property owner partnered to improve West 53rd Street with curb, gutter, sidewalk, and landscaping, paving the way for pedestrian connectivity to once what was a dirt road. My partner saw the value in adding the money to create this public street and the improvements for the future project that we previously had approval on. So just working through my notes here. The Mountain View Townhomes project started out as 72 townhomes on individual lots. Adjustments to the number of lots had to be made because Settlers Canal, south of the project sitting up above, had some issues with some of the retaining walls that we were proposing. In order to be a good neighbor, we reduced the number of lots down to 61. And we're moving forward with those 61 lots. That previous apartment project that was approved was granted verbal access for pedestrian connectivity onto the Fred Meyer property. This property that that we've been working towards developing sits in between the Fred Meyer and the Settlers Canal. It's a very hindered site. There isn't a lot of accessibility. It sits at the border of the Garden City boundaries. And it's a challenging site, to say the least. Moving forward with this project that we received approval on, I moved forward with the assumption that Fred Meyer would also provide the easements, the access that we were requesting for not only pedestrian connectivity, but our emergency vehicle access. And Fred Meyer's is not the owner of the property. Fred Meyer, the parent company is Kroger. Kroger is who I was working with to get these easements pushed through. And the process is that Kroger recommends approval or not to the owner of the property, which at the time was MetLife. Working through the process, trying to get these easements in front of Kroger and then in front of MetLife, it was challenging, took some time, COVID hit, and ultimately, after months and months of communication, trying to communicate, the need for these easements, Kroger came back and said, we're not going to recommend approval for these easements. We're looking, the owners are looking at selling the property. MetLife sold the property to a new owner that closed in 2021. And this new owner is out of Florida. They're a developer with over 800 assets in their portfolio. Continued to work through Kroger to try and get the necessary access, the easements that we had proposed. And again, they kept stalling. went to the effort to send them the easements, the drafted documents, the exhibits, everything so that they could review them, send them off to the new property owner. As time dragged on, I took it upon myself to call the property owner myself, made contact with the owner. And unfortunately, he told me that they didn't give a crap about our project and were not going to grant us any easements. We were forced to redesign the project, keeping the same intent with the townhomes, but we're now down to 58 lots because instead of having the emergency vehicle access into the back of the Fred Meyer emergency vehicle access, they were not granting that. So we now have incorporated the emergency vehicle turnaround within our project, which caused us to lose additional lots. We're down to 58 lots now. And the challenge is the pedestrian connectivity. We're for pedestrian connectivity, understand the intent, and have tried really hard to provide this. I don't know if you recall the first go around of this project in 2020, but it was recommended that we get access up to Settlers Canal from our project. We were all for that. The attorney for Settlers came back and said, no, we're not going to allow you access. Okay, can't get access, pedestrian access to this, what I consider to be a great amenity for our public. The maintenance roads for Settlers Canal continues to get used for pedestrian accessibility and recreation. Unfortunately, we had to fence off the access for vehicles because people continued to dump garbage on our property. And that's not something that I'm okay with. Even with the fence being up, the public still continues to access the maintenance roads along Settlers Canal. Through this process, I learned that Boise City and Settlers Canal had come together and are creating Boise's first linear park across from Capitol High School. So Settlers Canal has actually granted the city of Boise an easement so that they now can create what I see happening in the future with the rest of the maintenance roads for that border Settlers Canal. So when I approached Settlers Canal, after learning that they, accepted these easements for public access on this shorter 2,000 foot stretch of maintenance road, Settlers came back and said, no, we're not going to do that here on, above our property. I asked why not. They said, because we have a huge problem with trash, trespassing, and basically the reasons why we fenced off the property. I personally feel like that's bound to happen in the future in the sense that the rest of these maintenance roads are going to become linear parks. It's an amenity. I think it's an old school way of going about things with the canal company, and it's going to take new administration in the canal company to really see the benefits of this and to address this and to create this public amenity like they have across from Capitol. But again, we were denied access up to their property. So I'm in a situation where I'm denied access to an amenity that is above us, that I consider to be something that the pedestrians, the owners, the people in our project would like to utilize. I'm also in a situation where I can't provide the pedestrian accessibility into the Fred Meyer. But what we have done is we took a dirt road, a public street, and spent our own money and created this pedestrian connectivity. So within our project, we have connectivity from the west end of the project with the turnaround for emergency vehicles. We have a plaza that we've created. We have colored sidewalks that take people out to the public street that we improved per ACHD conditions. We had to put a cul-de-sac in at the end and finish the improvements on West 53rd. So in my opinion, we have created this connection from a site that is more or less landlocked, that has had a difficult, time with pedestrian and vehicular connectivity, and we've created this connection. And at this point, that is almost the best that we can do. We're willing to provide a pathway up to the canal where it stops at the fence for what we see to be a future connection. And that is something that we would even address in the CC&Rs for a future connection, but we cannot make these property owners give us access onto their property so that we can create more of a pedestrian connection. There's an issue with the intersection of Goddard and Glenwood and Mountain View. It does not create a very safe passage intersection for the students that currently travel from Capitol High School through our property to get to the Fred Meyer on a consistent basis. In talks with ACHD, in their 5-year plan, they're going to improve that intersection. But what's not going to happen is there's not going to be sidewalks on the east side of Glenwood going up the hill because of the slope of that hill. It's just not something that ACHD is willing to do. And so we're in a situation here where we have tried to create this pedestrian connectivity. Nothing in the project has changed other than the fact that we cannot now accommodate what we would hope a good neighbor would do, a developer in this situation, in connecting to this amenity, this retail environment that ultimately connects the people in the project to other amenities, close by the Fred Meyer. But we have created this connectivity onto 53rd Street where there's a new Dutch Brothers going in on the corner. And we've given this opportunity for pedestrians to safely get to the public street. What the pedestrians do once they get onto this public street, I cannot dictate. But what we can do is our best to provide this connectivity through the only means that we're given at this time. And so I'm really hoping that you see the challenges that have been presented, the efforts that we've gone to. This has been a couple of years now since we've started this townhouse project, and not only has it taken years, but we've lost a good number of lots that are going to affect the affordability aspect of what we've been trying to provide. The nature of the project has not changed in the sense that we have townhomes on individual lots that are smaller in square footage in hopes of catering to an affordable market. Unfortunately, affordability now in the valley is like $400,000, and that's not where we started. But as we lose more lots and as time goes on, these prices go up and we run more risk because of what happens in the marketplace that we don't have control over, raising interest rates, various aspects of the market that we just cannot control. This change was significant enough for us to have to come back through the hearing process and to request this modification. And I'm here before you to ask for approval and recognize the challenges and see what we've done to work through this as best as possible, realizing the efforts we put in and the money we've already spent to improve what was previously a dirt public road and create this pedestrian connectivity. And it doesn't stop here necessarily. And as I said, I believe that in the future, these maintenance roads will become the amenity that they're used for and will be recognized as such. And we will be able to connect, into that amenity. Right now, we just can't be forced to cross access onto somebody else's property. So with that, I'm open for questions from any commissioners that may, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Couple things before I open it up to the other commissioners. You said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you said something about approving tonight. So again, I'll just state again that we're just providing a recommendation to city council, whatever comes up. So that was
Yes.
number one. And then number two, just for clarity's sake, the pathway from to the west side up to Chinden, that potential for a future development, that is not possible now because the owner of that little strip of dirt there between your parcel and Chinden is not supportive of that.
No property owner surrounding this is supportive
Okay.
of granting us access.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the applicant by the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wild.
So if I'm trying to put the plat onto the property, there are currently kind of well-worn paths that you referred to as being probably fairly heavily used by the Capitol students in particular. But those who are coming from the bench down, let's say just to Fred Meyer, is this wouldn't, certainly they wouldn't have lawful access, but the path itself would still remain.
So the grade difference from the asphalt back drive aisles of the Fred Meyer and this property that I'm trying to develop is 8 to 10 feet. And so previously there was, a pedestrian ADA accessible ramp and stairs that came down to access their parking lot. We have to build an 8 to 10 foot high boulder retaining wall. And so access is not going to be possible. However, I will say that there is another pathway that is accessible if these students walk a little bit further down north on Glenwood. There is a path that does go down on the Fred Meyer property to access the Fred Meyer, and that is the likely route that the students will take. It does not put them into a situation where they're going to be walking between a guardrail and Glenwood. This path starts beforehand, and I've gone to the effort to have signs designed that the path is this way to access Fred Meyer once we start construction, because once machinery gets on the site and this boulder wall starts to be built, the students are going to have a very challenging time crossing the same, path that they have going down the path that you first referenced.
I guess that's kind of what I'm getting to is, you hit on it. They can't take the higher path because you're going to boulder that area. They'll have to come further down. They're going to find a way. I guess that's my point. They're not going to find a way down boulders, but they will have some other reasonably safe method.
I agree. And I would also venture to guess that the owners, renters, guests of the project are probably going to figure out a way to get to the Fred Meyer parking lot as quick and easily as possible, as opposed to walking all the way around West 53rd to go around onto Chinden and to get into the parking lot. Now, when this issue came up and my partner and I, were trying to figure out a likely solution, we walked from the project out onto 53rd and crossed in front of Nelson. Nelson RV has a private sidewalk that they built. That sidewalk unfortunately terminates right where the Thurman Mill Canal dips under Chinden. And so pedestrians at that point are forced to go into not the lane of traffic, but into that, the 10 foot, 15 foot of road of Chinden. And then there's another little dirt path that's probably 10 feet that you walk right into the Fred Meyer parking lot. And in discussion with the Department of Transportation, they have no interest in allowing a sidewalk to encroach onto Chinden, where they have future plans to actually improve Chinden to make it wide.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wild. Any other questions? Commissioner Brown?
Sir, I'm not quite clear. I was just looking through you have read the decision document, the draft decision document?
Yes, sir.
In the event that we recommended approval, is there any requirement in there that you're requesting that we have to waive? Or the way it's worded right now, I was very quick, I went over this and I had reviewed it before. The way it's worded right now, there is not a requirement that would require you to make this connection that you're not able to make, is there?
I would not say that there is a requirement, but there is within the code and within the comp plan, the pedestrian and transportation connectivity, which is a very important part of that comp plan.
No, I understand that. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I mean this specific decision document. Is there anything in there that you are asking that would be waived from the way it's drawn up right now?
Commissioner Brown, the approval that we received from council for the previous subdivision did have a requirement for that final plat to be signed off on, that we received the easements that we were requesting from the property owner of the Fred Meyer. And so because that condition of approval for getting those easements was a part of that decision, I believe that, yes, that is a requirement.
Okay, so that answered my question.
Okay, staff could probably answer that better, but that would be my.
And I will be asking the staff to make sure. I understand. I wanted to make sure that I understood, that we understood exactly what you were, why we wanted to present this, to see what exactly you needed. All right?
Yeah, there was
that explained it.
There was a big enough change to the project that it required this process, the hearing process.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
You
Chairman,
will have a
Commissioners.
chance to rebut later. We will now hear the staff presentation.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this is a subdivision fiscal year 2020-00001. The applicant, Mr. Hale, has basically presented what I was going to present. So I'm going to keep my presentation very short, sweet, starting with the late submittal from ITD. I printed it out for you guys as it was a late submittal today around 4 o'clock. It should be found somewhere in front of you in all of your papers. It's also online for anyone looking to reference it. It's also short and sweet. I don't know if you want to take a moment now to read it, or maybe just wait until after I'm done presenting. That might be the best method. All right, so in regards to 53rd Street, this street is currently under development on the east side with Dutch Bros. They have their entitlements, they have their building permits. If you've driven by, they're currently under construction. However, it is only for a portion of the eastern side of 53rd, more towards Chinden Street. So for the rest of the east side of 53rd, there will be no improvements for pedestrians to access and utilize. The west side, as you can see on the screen here in my presentation, does have pedestrian improvements per our code standards, and that does run the whole length of 53rd on the western side. And additionally, the applicant is required to improve the end, the terminus with the roundabout, or not roundabout, the cul-de-sac with a detached sidewalk. So pedestrians do have access on 53rd to West Chinden. However, it's only on the western side for the entire extent of 53rd and only a portion of the east side. Do this, okay. And then not only is the pedestrian improvement lacking on the eastern side of 53rd, but a pedestrian, if they did take the western sidewalk and then out onto Chinden in front of Nilsson's, I'll move this. There is a sidewalk on the private property, so there is a public easement over that sidewalk. But it does terminate. It does terminate on to West Chinden, which you can see here on the screen. There's the Thurman Mill ditch, and then it would require that the pedestrian goes out onto the public right of way of Chinden, more into the shoulder area, but it's still uncomfortable until they get dumped onto the Fred Meyer property, where there's this little goat trail, or they continue on the shoulder to the stoplight intersection of Kent and Chinden. And with that being said, there is the intersection of Kent and Chinden. This is utilized as a primary pedestrian crossing for Chinden, other than that along Glenwood or further to the east along 50th Street. Those are the only two stoplights in this vicinity. I have highlighted in aqua the path that these residents of the subdivision will take in order to get to the greenbelt, as this will most likely act as their primary route to get to the greenbelt. And so they can either go to the west towards Eagle, utilizing Glenwood and all those pedestrian improvements like the sidewalk pathway, or they can continue on to Allworth and down through the numbered streets of Garden City. But our primary concern as staff goes is the access and the availability of pedestrian and bicycle friendly features, not only within the subdivision, but with the connections to outside the adjacent properties. So Capitol High School, Fred Meyer, the Greenbelt, Dutch Bros, and so on and so forth. So that is the primary concern of this subdivision at this point in time. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Hannah. Questions for staff? Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I want to go right to the chase, and that was the questions I had for the applicant. The way, and I've been looking at it, the way this draft approval document is written, in the event that we recommended approval, is there any requirement in here that remains from the original 2020 decision that came up to us? This is modifying, that would require them to have this connection that they're not able to get from the property owners, both the settlers and from Fred Meyer people, whoever owns it now.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Brown, there is no verbiage or condition in the decision document requiring that those easements are created or that pathway is created within the subdivision.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Shepherd.
Questions. The way I understood it was that the staff's primary concern was accessibility to the greenbelt, and that you have it outlined there. But I mean, I guess I'm not really understanding how that's the applicant's fault, because that's just the way I mean, what would, how else would they fix that, you know, like? It just kind of seems like that's just the natural way anybody would get
Right.
there, with any kind of development there.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. So we're not necessarily requiring that the applicant improve everything between their subdivision and the green belt or Capitol High School, everything that we've talked about this evening. However, connectivity and creating a development that best utilizes their site and makes the site a better improvement for the overall city, like long-term planning, comprehensive planning speaks to that. And so while we can certainly have a magnifying glass on the site itself, and it appears to have great connectivity from within the development, if you zoom out a little bit, it might not be the most appropriate site design to help foster that connectivity to the overall community.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Any other questions by the commission? Okay. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
All right, so next step is a public hearing. So we will now hear testimony. If there's anyone out there that wishes to provide testimony on this application, now is the time. We don't have any signups in the room here, so we'll just go right to Zoom. If you're out there and you want to provide testimony for this, now's the time. Don't see any hands being raised or anything, so it doesn't look like there is any public testimony for this. So we'll move right on to rebuttal. Mr. Hale, if you wanted to come back up and provide any rebuttal testimony.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. I'd also like to thank staff. They've been good to work with. It's a really challenging site, and we're working on this for years. But I did just want to put that on the record, as staff has been good to work with in providing suggestions and, you know, trying to help us through this process. I think any property owner that tries to develop this site, knowing what we know, is going to come up against the same situation, and trying to get connectivity to neighboring property owners that simply won't allow it is the challenge. And as I stated before, we're all for it, even willing to put a path in, whether it be, you know, in the development now or in the CC&Rs as a future amenity to lead up to this connectivity. We're all for that. I do also want to put on the record that I did get an extension granted from council in October of 21 because we were running up against some timeframes as we were trying to process, you know, the conditions of approval. One item that I did not address, there was a condition to create a water feature at the entrance of the subdivision, which we were in favor of previous to working through the construction aspect of the civil designs. The engineers got concerned about the close proximity of our infrastructure to the open Thurman Mill Canal. And although, you know, we saw that as a water feature that could be incorporated into the amenities of the project, we ended up having to tile 300 feet, pipe it, cover it up for our concerns, the engineer's concerns for future liability, that there might be erosion that could impact, you know, the infrastructure that we were putting in place. And so I've asked for the water feature aspect to be waived from the original approval, the original conditions of approval. In place of that, we have designed a second plaza. The first plaza at the west end of this project was a recommendation by design review. And we felt as though taking out this water feature, it needed to be replaced by something. And so towards the entry of the subdivision, we have designed a second plaza area that ties in that first plaza at the far west end through the sidewalks that ultimately connects to West 53rd Street. And so that was a request that I made in the modification. I didn't address that in my first statements. Do want to just make a point too that the ACHD condition of approval for building out that cul-de-sac and finishing off West 53rd has been completed. And so we've continued to spend thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in pursuit of making this site appropriate for development. And lastly, I'm not privy to that email that staff spoke about. I'm assuming it's not something that's detrimental to the project, or else I would have been informed, but I understand it came in last minute. And so that would be awesome. Okay, all right, as anticipated. And so that is all I have. If there's any more questions, I stand to answer that. If not, I appreciate your time tonight.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the public hearing is closed at this time, so we will move to the discussion amongst the commission members. Commissioner Montoya, your thoughts on this one?
So I think the applicant has done a great job of going over and above to get connectivity, and having dealt with Kroger and Fred Meyer in that subdivision myself, I understand the pain and suffering you went through. So kudos to you on that effort. But do like what you proposed. I can sympathize with you on having to limit the amount of units based on the current conditions. So I think that that's a good overall way of handling that. I do see the conditions that you've outlined as a hurdle to provide the access, and you've gone through the routes that you have to try to get there. So I'm not sure that I would say that I would see any need to discuss that further from my perspective. As far as the water feature goes, I'm not sure. I would have to ask staff whether or not that is a condition that we need to waive. I do see what you're saying, and if there is some water that's associated somewhere else on the property, it seems like that would be an adequate way to deal with that. So I could be in favor of that. So I would be in favor of recommending the application move forward based on the conditions and the alternative location for a water feature.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Montoya. Commissioner Wild.
Yeah, I've been here so long, I think I remember 2014, this application. It's such a constrained site. It's such an awkwardly located, I mean, it's no man's land, right? It's below the canal, it's behind Fred Meyer. It's hard to get to, on foot it's real hard to get to, and obviously with 53rd, now you can get to it. I know trash goes there. I've got a kid at Capitol High School. I know a kid at Capitol High School who rolled his car on your property. This is a very good plan for this property. I'm like Commissioner Montoya. I had kind of forgotten about the water feature, but I would be supportive of that waiver if it's required. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I am very appreciative of all the work that you've been through to get the easements, and I'm hopefully in the future they will go through somehow, some way. I don't know that I have a lot right now. Just the things that I looked at, I didn't hear us talk about, like canal stabilization. I had like marked on here So I don't know if that's something that we need to really talk about. It's something that the Garden City engineer had put out. I will follow you all's lead on this one because I'm new and I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'm very much in favor of recommending approval. I think this applicant is go above and beyond. And I have, having dealt in my past life on seriously with the issue with settlers, the only thing that they haven't had to deal with that some others have to deal with in this valley is the railroad. And at least he didn't have to deal with the canal company and the railroad. You put those two together and then you really have a problem. I do want to make a little bit of a quick comment. I want to, Commissioner Wild talked about a friend of his son's that rode his car there. The reason that ACHD doesn't want to have, won't allow a sidewalk on the east side is in about 1994, a lady drove her car off there. She had about 4 kids with her, and it was a miracle that nobody was killed on that slope when you come right after you come through the intersection. So that's one of the reasons why they're so reluctant to allow a sidewalk to put up there. That being said, I'm very much in favor of approving this and including waiving the water feature.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Brown. I think, yeah, I'll just say, you know, before we move to a motion on this, that I'm excited about this development and have been ever since I first heard about it. Echoing the other commissioners about the challenges with this piece of property and the applicant coming in here and wanting to turn this piece of property into something basically great. So far better than what it is. So definitely supportive of approval for this. I do think that whatever the motion comes through, there is, I saw on the staff report that one of the waivers is subdivision entry monument sign, but I couldn't find it in the draft decision document. So I guess it doesn't say water feature. So maybe, I don't know if I need to reopen the public hearing to get clarity on if there's anything we need to do with regard to our motion on the water restriction. Do we need to state that we're waiving that?
That's just a question.
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I can clarify that on page 19 of the decision document, number 13, it does state Thurman Mill shall be utilized as an amenity feature for the subdivision entryway and signage. As part of a motion, you would be allowed or permitted to essentially just eliminate that condition out of
Okay.
the decision document, if
Okay.
you so move.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, very
Thank you.
much. Yeah, so let's do that. So I think we are ready for a motion on this one with that help from staff there.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wild,
I move approval of SUB FY 2020-1 Mountain View Townhomes to recommend that preliminary and final plat be processed as a planned unit development recommended to City Council with one minor addition to strike on page 19. I guess it's condition number 13 relating to the Thurman Mill as an amenity.
Second.
right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of recommending this get approved by city councils, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we're good to go there, sir. Thank you for your time tonight.
And there was a ton of canal stabilization discussion, and I think that's already part of the requirements. So that's a good
Yeah,
catch.
yeah, that's correct.
That was a huge. part
That
of
way,
it.
yeah.
You remember that?
Yes,
long-
it's
long
part of
discussion.
it. It's in there.
Yeah.
Okay, it's in the engineer's requirements, which they reference in the city document. Good luck.
Good evening. Right, let's do a break for, let's get going again at, let's just say 2015.
Great, thank you.
Are the mics still on?
Yeah, the library probably closed. They locked it up.
I mean, everybody's.
And thank you for your attorney's guidance there.
Oh, yeah.
I just asked them a question. I didn't even know.
Well, with all these attorneys, we shouldn't have any problem with doing something that's not legally okay, right?
I don't know, be careful who you trust.
Really like this thing, but it seems like it's got a short in it. So when you get certain position, it goes dead. Like right now, really, it's totally dead. But I don't know what it is.
You know, they're putting a Dutch Bros on the corner,
Right.
closer to Capitol High School, and they think they're gonna prevent, I mean, it's like water, it's gonna find its way to whatever.
Oh, no,
Dutch
they're gonna-
Bros and or.
Well, you remember the pictures that previously, the path that's been worn down there because of all the kids going down
Yeah.
there. They're not gonna be able to stop that. But their problems, it's in spades, it's all over. The Seller's not the only one that have this. All kinds of people use those maintenance roads and that, and this just me speaking, but I'm biased against what they do because we've had, and it's Settlers especially, you know, when we did Maple Grove, I think I told you, we wound up paying $2.5 million of ACHD money, people's taxpayers' money that should never have had to be spent, which could have used to improve lots of roads.
Yeah.
At $2.5 million, it just went to the lawyers and that because of their intransigence.
It's the only bit of lawyering where they say, yes, we'll get you what you need, but you're gonna pay for my time to negotiate it with you.
Absolutely, and they do.
It's a great business model if you can do it.
Yeah.
All right, here we go with our last item for this evening. CPA FY 2022-5. Garden City Code Title 8, specifically 8.3-C, 8-6B-3D, and 8-7A-2. Proposal to modify and clarify definitions and requirements of certain portions of code pertaining to the Sorrell Mitchell Work, Live, Create Overlay District standards, definitions, and design review findings. The applicant is also the staff in this case, so we'll pretty much follow our normal flow, except we will have one 15-minute presentation by staff. That will be Jessica Stedman. And before I have Jessica come up, I just want to say to the commission that we're going to be presented with some goals by our legal staff. So it is our goal tonight to have a response to these two options. It's not, we don't have to land on this perfect, you know, but ideally we would have a recommendation based on whatever these two options are. But there's going to be other things that we're, you know, free to talk about as well with regard to this whole topic. So regarding parking and some other things. So, but anyway, I just wanted to call out that we're going to be presented with two options that we need to consider in our deliberations here tonight. So with that, Jessica Stedman will be presenting for the staff this agenda item.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Jessica Stedman, and I'm a legal intern working for the Garden City Prosecutor's Office on a limited license under the discretion of Charles Wadhams. I'm here to discuss the proposed Cyril Mitchell Work, Live, Create, and Design Review ordinance amendments. Due to recent litigation, the city of Garden City is required to update portions of our code within the Cyril Mitchell Work, Live, Create overlay district and the design review findings. This excerpt from Mr. Wadhams, found on page 3 of his memo, outlines the issue with our code and the action we need to take. It states, as you can see, that the reviewing body needs guidance concerning how to determine compliance. If there are no standards for review and approval, an ordinance may be struck down for vagueness or decisions overturned as being arbitrary and capricious, which is what happened in the recent litigation. So we are required now to develop clear and objective standards specifically for these 3 portions of code. Judge Medema in his decision specifically mentioned the 1-to-1 ratio, the Work, Live, Create parking requirements, and the design review findings. The standards within these areas are subjective, which means they can be interpreted in different ways. To be lawful under LUPA, Idaho statute, the standards need to be objective, which means that anyone reading them can understand exactly what the standard means and what is expected when they submit a project proposal within the Work, Live, Create district. The memo by Mr. Wadhams outlines those issues with each of these sections, and the proposed ordinances are attempting to address those ambiguity issues. Apologize, my mouse is not in the right place. So there are 2 options. The first is to repeal the Work, Live, Create district and revise the design review findings. The second option is to revise both the Work, Live, Create and the design review findings. So the first option, as I said, is to repeal the Work, Live, Create district. If we did that, the parking regulations would default to the base zone parking regulations. And in that case, we would need to revise the base parking regulations as well. And the second option is to revise the Work, Live, Create district. We would also, in that case, need to revise the Work, Live, Create parking regulations, and ideally, eventually, the base zone parking regulations as well. So Ms. Thornborough is going to go over the design review recommendations. But first, I would just like to say that the legal department does not have a recommendation. I apologize, Ms. Thornborough, on whether we should repeal or revise. It is of note, however, that the Cyril Mitchell Overlay District has only been used twice since it was instigated, and one of those times resulted in the lawsuit that we now have to repeal or replace the Cyril Mitchell overlay. I would also like to say that if we do decide to repeal the overlay district, we would not get rid of any of the Cyril Mitchell branding, signage, mapping, or marketing. All of those would remain in place. Repealing would perhaps change the district to a design standard rather than an overlay district. But the Cyril Mitchell Work, Live, Create brand and intentions that accompany that brand would remain the same. So we're hoping that as you have quite a bit of legal and development-based expertise, you will be able, as a recommending body to City Council, to offer suggestions, to refine the wording in the proposed amendment, and make it objective for both the design review findings and the Work, Live, Create overlay district. So with that, I will turn the time over to Ms. Thornborough, and also stand for questions or suggestions that you may have. Chairman, members of the commission, and thank you to Ms. Stedman.
I am briefly going to give an overview of actually a discussion that happened at the design review. The design review during the meeting that the public hearing was scheduled for did not make a formal recommendation at that time. They chose to continue their deliberations to a later date. However, they did discuss this matter, and they were clearly leaning towards fixing the Cyril Mitchell Work, Live, Create district, and understanding that, and also requested that a committee be formed with experts as well as individuals with long-term interest in the neighborhood and also new interest be formed to really dive deep and create a usable overlay, or not overlay specifically, but a usable code that could help guide the neighborhood in the direction that it's envisioned in the comprehensive plan. And with that recommendation, or discussion, I should say, because it wasn't a formal recommendation. They did note that they also felt that the city should look at the plan unit development regulations and what triggers the plan unit development rate or plan unit projects that come in. So some of those examples might be more than 4 units on a common lot will trigger a lot of the plan unit developments, parking, 0 lot lines for townhomes. And then presumably, I would suspect that the variety of housing would be addressed at that time as well within the plan unit development. So the design review does not have a formal recommendation again, but they have noted that they would be in favor of fixing the Live, Work, Create district, but amending it to such a manner that it would implement the comprehensive plan's vision. And it was also noted that the Live, Work, Create ordinance right now is really looking at a mix between or is intended to look at a mix between 1 residence and 1 non-residential interacting property. I believe that their proposal would look at that a little bit more broadly, where it would be a practical code that would actively implement the neighborhood, allowing for residential and allowing for other mixed use components. That may be me conjecturing a little bit from their conversation. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Jessica. Any questions for either staff members by the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wild.
Jenna, I know you've heard me say it before. It's only in Garden City where Garden City staff has to apply to change an ordinance. But that's just a side note. What I guess I'm a little confused about is, and you just enhanced my confusion. This almost feels like it's an agenda set for a work session. There's so much material, there's so much to consider. Now you're saying design review committee wants to step back, do it the right way, get public interest, private interest, get everybody into, I don't know, do charrettes and do whatever you do to solicit more public opinion about what the Cyril Mitchell, the Work Create district is for, how's a comprehensive plan fit into that. Now you're bringing out PUDs, which I think is another kind of significant code problem. I guess it's been a few years since Parametrics or whoever it was we hired at Garden City to kind of go through and scrub our code. It needs another scrubbing, I think. So I know Commissioner Chairman Rasmussen kind of give us some big ideas about what the goals are. But it sounds to me like there might be a third option, and that is to do what design review did and kind of, I don't want to say kick the can down the road, but really take a half step back and consider all the options and do this right. And it feels a little rushed to even pick one of those two paths to just at the outset.
Chairman Commissioner Wild understood. I believe that this was processed in such a manner to address any potential liabilities that the city may have for having that judgment order. But certainly the city is aware, and this year funding has been set aside to really address code issues, and little by little, the city is working through those. It's an in-house process right now, so it is going slowly. But Ms. Stedman has been working on a number of code potential proposals to bring forward in the very near future. But I absolutely do understand there are a number of code provisions that do need to be gone through again at this point in time. And Mary, both where they're just a little clunky to begin with, and also the direction that over a decade has taken the city in.
I apologize for interrupting. Can I speak to your question as well? if you don't
Please.
mind? So it's a priority for Mr. Wadhams to amend the code. And as you said, this is a big lift. For now, it's essential that we comply with Judge Medema's order and fix the specific items that he requested. And for now, that would be a Band-Aid, but it would allow us to move forward and give us time to address the other concerns that are going to take a lot of time, work sessions, and give us more time to work on those if we just fix the urgent, so to speak, amendments that were mentioned in the order immediately.
So, thank you. And I understand the urgency, I guess. You don't have to answer, this is just commentary. Typically, if we have a public hearing, we're going to make a decision. But currently we have option 1 and option 2. And it seems like with the time constraints on the public to address those, that doesn't feel altogether fair to the public to use their 3 minutes to talk about whether option 1 or option 2 is, and then if we choose, let's say option 1, aren't we really saying you're going to come back with another draft?
Chairman Commissioner Wild, that is what I'm hearing that the Design Review Committee would be recommending.
Yeah, so I guess I'm just trying to square the urgency with what the next step is.
Yeah.
And
So
by the way, these are really hard questions for you to answer, so.
yes, yeah, I was hired back in January to work on this specifically. So it's been a good 5 months. But Chairman, Commissioners, I think what Jenna said is correct, that we would want to move forward with these urgent amendments and then revisit the issue and take the proper amount of time to have work sessions, find out what the public would prefer as with the work, live, create, and design review, and really dive into those and take as much time as needed to do a good, thorough job of amending those ordinances. But for now, we would like to move forward with just the urgent amendments that Judge Medema required to push those through with either option 1 or 2.
And either of those serves that purpose for the urgency. Got it.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, so then if I understand it, what we're sort of saying here, regardless of which one of these routes we recommended that the city council do, the immediate amendments that would be done would satisfy the judge. Those would be just those. They would just be, we would either route, you would still go on and we would do some other amendments to either the zoning code, or if we do the one going on and fix, live, work, and create ordinance, we would still, either way, we're going to continue on do other changes. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that is correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay,
This is
great.
just the-
Except, and correct me if I'm wrong, let's say, and I have no idea what the other commissioners in the room feel about either option, but let's say we were to land on repeal. That would be easier, it seems to me. And granted, we all want the right thing to happen here. It's code, for crying out loud. So, but if that was something we all agreed, that would be expeditious in solving this whole problem, more so than repairing.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and Jenna might want to speak to, or sorry, Ms. Thornborough might want to speak to this as well. It would be easier in fixing the issues with the Searle Mitchell. But as I stated earlier, we would then have to address the base parking regulations, which is a heavy lift as well.
Okay.
But in fixing specifically what was ordered by Judge Medema, yes, that would be an easy way to, well, not easy, but a good way to do so.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Montoya.
Chairman, are there any current applications that are going to be affected by the decision that we make tonight?
Chairman, Commissioner Montoya, there are none that would be affected. I was looking to Hannah to make sure that there weren't any in pre-application either, but there are certainly none that are applied for formally.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shepherd.
Mr. Chairman, could you help me understand when you guys said that if we did choose to repeal it, like the live work create district itself isn't going away. It's just going to be called something else. Is that right? Like we're still keeping the branding. We just need to fix the underlying issues like the parking and talk about the 1-to-1 ratio, but we're just like what we're repealing really is like an overlaying code. Is that what I'm understanding? Or an overlaying ordinance in order to make the code match the state law?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, yes, that's correct. So we would be repealing the overlay zone, but the branding and the maps, all of that would remain in place.
Chairman, Commissioner Shepherd, just to piggyback on that comment, the Searle Mitchell Live Work Create District is within the Garden City Comprehensive Plan as a neighborhood, and there's signage that's currently within the neighborhood. And just to note that it is the Live Work Create in the comprehensive plan, and it's the Work Live Create in code, just to make it confusing for everyone.
We could fix that too.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will open now for public testimony. There is nobody in the room here, but we have a handful of people on Zoom. And if any of those people want to provide public testimony, okay, there's a hand going up. Sir, yours was the first hand that went up. Let's see, I can't read the name. Is that Jason? Yeah, go ahead. You, yes, you turned your camera on. Name and just provide your name and then go ahead with your public testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Jason Jones, 208 East 33rd Street, Garden City, Idaho. So I think I really just want to give you guys a little bit of background. So I want to say it was my lawsuit that the city is referring to why they want to repeal the live work. Having said that, you know, I think there's some maybe misunderstanding about the parts of what the judge really felt was wrong with this case. So I do believe the judge pointed out one section of code within the live work that he felt was arbitrary. And it's one little section that basically says the planner can decide on the parking that's appropriate. Having said that, it would be very easy to remove that one section and leave the rest of the live work code alone. The rest of the live work code actually is probably better than our regular code. It actually has commercial parking requirements for those workspaces that are actually part of the code. The regular code doesn't have that. And so the real truth is if the live work is repealed, we're actually in a worse situation because then we have no code that has parking regulations for workspaces or commercial uses, which is what the judge pointed out was wrong. The other changes that I think the city intern pointed out, I don't believe were actual things the judge wanted changed in the code. I think what I see as the bigger issue is that those things weren't part of the code and the city attempted to arbitrarily enforce things that aren't actually written down in code. And so, like, for example, the 1-to-1 ratio. Our neighbor who objected to the project claimed that the live work code was intended to be a 1-to-1 ratio of living spaces to working spaces. Even though the live work code specifically allows for multiple live work spaces and multiple spaces separated or together. And it actually has a code requirement that specifies a maximum amount of space dedicated to living and workspaces, 75%, which kind of keeps you from, what our neighbor suggested is that we could just do 100 workspaces with one tiny living space and that it would be legal because there's no 1-to-1 ratio. But the code actually has something that prevents that from happening already, which is a 75% requirement. And so we met that 75% requirement when we submitted. We just didn't meet a 1-to-1 ratio because the truth is when you're doing large developments with multiple spaces, almost every project, they said the city pointed out that this code never gets used. And it's because, well, since we applied that application in 2019, the city denied it because it didn't have a 1-to-1 ratio, but every other project that's come forward since then didn't have a 1-to-1 ratio either. So
just really quickly, you're nearing your 3 minutes. Just wanted to say that.
So, what I would recommend is that, again, the code could be updated with one minor change. And I think there's like a mischaracterization that there's some parking problem with the code. It's literally one line. That line didn't apply to the lawsuit. The judge just pointed out that it was illegal. It's also the same thing that's wrong with the entire other section of code. And yet the city isn't proposing right now to fix that. They're just effectively trying to get rid of this live work code, which will push us to the code that is illegal.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for your testimony. Let's have Jody present next. And if you can state your name, please, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I'm Jody Eichelberger, 440 East Thurman Mill Street in the Live Work Create District, Waterfront District. And I'm also the program director at Searles Place. Jason spoke to some very specific things. I'm going to be a little more general and just a little more background. There were some questions at City Council that Cyril Mitchell, who is our namesake and who lived in the property on 33rd Street, where Cyril's Place is located, actually served in the position that you're serving now and was part of the Planning and Zoning Commission that created the Work, Live, Create overlay. There was a question of whether it was just meant to be a memorial. Well, in fact, she worked on this overlay, and it was only a few years later after she died that then, in honor of her, the district was given her name. So from the beginning, the overlay had meaning. And, over time, we now learn that only a couple of applications have happened, which is not ideal and is why we like the idea of the city and the design review and planning and zoning helping to fix it to where it is something useful. But even with it not being used, I think there is an importance to having the overlay as opposed to just being a neighborhood. And that is what it inspires. And I think I probably don't have to tell you all in the time that you dedicate to this, that planning and zoning has meaning and codes have meaning, and they matter to people as they think of what they're going to do, what they're going to build, what they're going to create. I'm certainly very much involved in the whole Live, Work, Create brand in that I live here, work here, and create here. I don't have a separate studio, but that is something that we would like to see more of, that idea, as Searle did, of having a private space where you live, and then on the same property, having a place that you can invite the public to see your work, that you can create your work, that you could hold workshops. The problem, of course, has been affordability, and that's an increasing problem. I really do appreciate, I think it was Commissioner Wild who spoke about this feeling a little rushed, and maybe this isn't the right way. I think we were caught a little off guard with the either repeal it or fix it, and are trying to catch up ourselves. And well, how can we do this in a way that's going to impact the future in a positive way, and keep the vision going that feels like we've had a lot of momentum and continue to have more momentum. This district actually has been mentioned in the media multiple times just in the last couple of weeks.
And just real quick, I'm just going to mention about 20 seconds left for your testimony, sir. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So we appreciate that the brand would continue to exist, but I guess the message I want to leave you with is that we think that the overlay is an important part of that, and it would affect the brand by not being there anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to Hannah Ball now. Ms. Ball?
Thank you, Commissioners. Hannah Ball, 215 East 34th Street, Garden City, Idaho. And my comments were specifically regarding the staff's thoughts on the timeline. And again, I've looked at this code hundreds of times, and I would just please ask the commission to consider, if this section of code goes away and we're left with the base code of parking, that section of code is still arbitrary today. So I think this takes a little bit longer analysis and putting a working group and establishing what that section of code needs to be to make the bodies of government satisfied. And I think that's been the largest frustration in both projects and now in code and in future litigation, that we haven't established parking minimums. And if we take this section of code out and we revert to base code, that section of parking is arbitrary. And so I would just please ask the commission to convene a working group, and let's establish what that parking code needs to be to satisfy Garden City. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Greg Hahn, I see your hand raised. You are free to go. If you could, yes, name and address, please, as the others have, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. I'm Greg Hahn. I live in Boise, but I work as the executive director of Searle's Place. Jody covered a lot of our position on this, and I won't repeat that. I'll just say our board has sort of empowered us to kind of express that desire that we think it's really valuable, and we think that the meat behind it is also valuable. That doesn't mean that we think that the exact meat that was crafted 15 years ago is exactly the right thing to do. In fact, we don't really weigh in on that, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here to draw up a set of guidelines that take this sort of unique and kind of downtown adjacent area that is what kind of wildly different, certainly than where a lot of folks in Garden City live, because of the nature of where it is, and the warehouses and the retail and the beer wineries and the 50 or so artists who live and or work in the area. So it really is a different place. I think parking is something that needs to be discussed. I think how do you encourage the sort of spaces that can be used creatively, whether it's an artist or a engineering firm like who's a couple doors down from us, or an entrepreneur who can live and launch a business from that space. I think there's just a lot of economic value to to doing it in a really intentional way. So I appreciate the folks who take a step back and think about it, and just wanted to say thanks, because it is going to be a big lift, but I think it's worth it.
Thank you very much, sir. Is there anybody else with a hand raised out there? I don't see that. Okay, It looks like that is the extent of our public testimony. Thank you to everybody for taking the time and providing your thoughts to the commission tonight. So with that, we'll move to the rebuttal. Staff can come up and address any comments or further commentary on their initial comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and commissioners, and thank you for the public comments as well. I would just like to note first that we have been working on, staff has been working on the parking regulations for the base zone in the background. So we are preparing to address that soon. I would also like to note that the option to repeal or fix the Cyril Mitchell and design review findings, that's not from Garden City Legal Department, that's directly from Judge Medema. That has to happen eventually, preferably, sooner rather than later. But I do understand there are concerns with, how heavy of a lift this is. Our code is similar to other jurisdictions in that it is subjective. We are just the first to have to fix it. So as Mr. Wadham said in front of design review, we're sort of spearheading code amendments, making them objective and clear as required by Idaho code. And just to address, there were several specific issues mentioned in the Cyril Mitchell work live create. For example, the parking requirements were specifically mentioned by Judge Mehta as being subjective, and the repair ordinance does attempt to address that issue. There were others as well, but we did our best to address the specific issues and not much else at this point, just to, as you put it, a Band-Aid until we can take the time to have work sessions and do the heavy lifting that's required to bring the code into compliance with LUPA and make it as objective and usable as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will have there's a question here. Commissioner Brown would like to ask a question of staff.
Yes, of course.
Sorry, I'm not going to let you off the hook that quick. Then thank you for working for Garden City and coming and doing this and helping us with this situation. So my question is, assuming that we made a recommendation to the city council that we wanted it amended it, we don't want it just done away with. That could be done. That would enable you, city council and the attorney, along with the development staff, to make to do the ordinance that's already been drafted out to solve the problem that they perceive the judge gave us. But that does not preclude going on and forming a committee for sort of like what the design review committee is recommending and pursuing additional changes. In other words, this is not a one-time thing. We could go on and make further changes to the particular district overlay. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairperson and Commissioner, yes, that is correct. And that's what we fully intend to do. We would really like to dive into the code, have work sessions open to the public and get their feedback on what they would prefer happen with the code and the wording there to make it as usable and objective as possible. So yes, we fully intend with either option to continue working on these portions of code as well as others to make them objective.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so that closes the public hearing with that, and we'll just move on to the discussion amongst the commission about next steps, our recommendations for next steps. So let's go with Commissioner Wild as a start.
I'm not in favor of repeal, I can say that. So to the extent that we are recommending to the city council an ordinance which either repeals and replaces or amends, or simply amends, I'm in favor of that latter option. Again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but I think we need to do what Ms. Stedman just described, which is fix what needs to be fixed now, get together with whoever we need to talk to, the development community, and revise the code in a thoughtful, measured way, and in a way that retains the original intent of Searles Place and the overlay district. Whether it remains an overlay district, I frankly am not terribly concerned about that. Her name's going to remain on it, and that's the important thing to me. So amendment is I guess where I'm leaning, and I think all we're doing tonight is recommending to the city council that they take that action. We're not doing anything more than that.
That's correct. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Wild. Commissioner Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Commissioner Wild. I'm not in favor of repealing it. It just seems too fast to do that. I would rather try to revise it. I mean, there's going to be underlying revisions needed to the code regardless, so I would rather I would rather do that, and I like the idea of having a committee and hearing from the community. And so my recommendation would be also to send it to the city council for recommending that they revise it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Brown.
All right, first of all, I need to say I'm very much in agreement with the other two commissioners that spoke so far. I'm not at all in favor of throwing it out. And one of the reasons, well, the primary reason, in all of the time that I've been on this planning and zoning commission, which is considerable, what has been accomplished down in that area is one of the most significant improvements in the reputation of Garden City and what we've done. I was a little bit surprised by the fact it's only been used twice. It may have only been used twice, but I guarantee you that what the objectives are and everything that's in the comprehensive plan of that area down there has been thought of. Hopefully, almost all the developments that have been come forward in that area, whether they actually used it or not. And I think, along with the testimony we heard from the public, I think if you do away with it, there'll be a bunch of the public that perceives that something was really lost there. So I'm very much in favor of that. I'm in favor of following it on. And in the vein of what the design review committee, I realize they didn't make a formal recommendation, but maybe we should. That being that, recommend that we need to go ahead and look at the whole thing and utilize a committee made up with what Jenna, and my understanding is Jenna made some of the recommendations that she mentioned there about who ought to participate. It shouldn't just be people that have been in that area for a long time. It should include people that have been in there a short time. And that may be the reason that it attracted them, and other developers and people that are doing it with that regard. And I presume this committee would be established by the city council. I'm not sure if that has to be, maybe we could do it, but I think the city council should give its imprimatur because they're going to do that. And looking into revising that. And finally, that committee and the changes shouldn't just apply to the overlay district, as I think was Jenna mentioned. And I, for a long time, have thought we really need to be looking at our PUD underlying regulations. This commission has had a lot of problems with what I would say proposals that are trying to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, right? In fact, we saw one tonight. And that needs to be addressed as part of this. That, for one, an underlying zoning ordinance, that it needs to be changed, and it definitely needs to be looked at along with this.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Commissioner Montoya.
I agree with the fellow commissioners. It's been stated well, and I have nothing further to add.
Okay. So thank you, Commissioner Montoya. I am going to be the one different person on this whole thing, which surprises me. So it makes me feel like I'm probably wrong. But I think the work the city did to create this overlay was a tremendous thing. I think the work, live, create part of the city is a tremendous asset. And the only reason I'm suggesting that it be repealed is so that we can build on it throughout more of the city. I think instead of trying to retain this little piece of the city that has all these attributes and development standards, I think that if we were to somehow take this opportunity and apply what was done with this overlay to more of the city, more flexible standards, whether it's parking minimums or no parking being addressed in the code, no parking requirements, I should say, whatsoever being addressed in the code. I think the eastern part of the city as a whole is ready for that type of development code. We have, not only is this part of the city a tremendous asset to the entire city, but we also have the Boise River through basically the entire city. And I think that enables us to do things that are probably pretty innovative with development criteria and standards in the whole valley with regard to mobility and bringing more people to our city without parking minimums that maybe constrain some development. So all that being said is I am the one person that that feels that a repeal of this will achieve better long-term objectives of what we want, of what I think the city, what design review and what city council and what this commission really wants for the rest of the city. But that's an opinion of mine. That's where I'm at. But of course, I've just discovered I'm in the minority on this opinion. So, but I wanted to put that out there. I'm really happy to hear that the branding for this will not disappear. This will always be Cyril Mitchell, part of the city, work, live, create. But outside of that, I think our development code is ready for the standards that were in that overlay to be a bigger part of the city. And that's why I feel like a repeal is probably the right long-term decision in this case. So that said, I think we're probably ready for a recommendation to city council. Again, I think similar to what design review did, I think a motion that includes doing what the city needs to do to fix the immediate issues, but also a recommendation to repeal or repair. And I think that would be the content of our motion.
Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate to ask a question right now following what you just said?
100% appropriate.
Okay.
Commissioner Shepherd.
So I like what you said about expanding it, and I wasn't thinking that broadly when I recommended revising it. I'm curious, can we still expand it even if we don't repeal it? Like, it's not set in stone the way it is now. Like, it can still, if we wanted to expand in the future, or do we have to, like, if we did want to expand it, would we then have to like repeal what it is now and then start it over?
So I will rely on staff for this. I'll give you my opinion on that, but I think a repeal of it forces us, the city, to probably expedite our code rewrite. But I don't know if staff has.
Chairman, members of the commission, I see that you're looking for direction. I would suspect to do a good job and to work with the committee, regardless if there was a repeal or not. A rewrite would take some time. It involves a number of meetings, a lot of research, public outreach. And so doing that in short order would be very difficult. And I do want to note that the comprehensive plan does have an objective to consider the expansion of the Searle Mitchell Live Work Create District. There was a lot of discussion at that time if it would dilute the district or if it would be appropriate to expand. And so there is a comp plan objective that does not consider that possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I just do have one small comment. Mr. Wadhams told the design review that we are here to serve. So whatever you want, whatever City Council wants, whatever the public wants, that's what we will attempt to implement into the code. And legal will be happy with it as long as it is objective and usable.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
It's all right. We're still in discussion, right?
Yes.
That prompted me, and your thoughts prompted on me. First of all, let me think. I'm looking at, all of you need to look at the little map or all of our zones that's on the front here, which represents the ideas put down in graphically so we can see it visually. It's right here. If you look at that, of what we put in the comp plan when we put it together. And by the way, I'm proud of the fact that when we originally put it together, I wasn't on this commission, but I served on a couple of the planning people that got together and meeting a series of meetings they had at the time, and I actually put in some contributions. So when you look at this, I think you might be overstating it a little bit. There are large parts of this city. Take from the eastern edge of the fairgrounds to the west and the parts that are north of the river. That kind of an overlay wouldn't work in those areas. For example, it wouldn't work. The large areas where it would work are down there adjacent pretty much to where Live, Work, and Create District is. And for example, it could include, one of the big things that's in here is where I used to work. And it's put down as a future planning area. Now, the reason that that's down there is because that envisions in the comp plan that someday ACHD, that yard they have down there, is gone. And you have that opportunity. Same thing is true over here where the fairgrounds is. That's why that's there, because it's not clear what exactly is going to wind up being the fairground. But what was envisioned is that could sort of be Garden City Center someday. So let's go back to the eastern part. It appears to me that more than applying it to the whole city, what you want to kind of look at is you want to grow what's there right now geographically more than applying it to the whole city. And in that sense, I think that could be accommodated easier within what we're doing. If we say, look, let's not throw it out, let's fix it and make it better, which is what I'm sort of envisioning we could do along with that. And whether or not, for example, we're gonna set this committee up, right? Hopefully the committee will come out, and it's gonna be of all the people that enter. What might come out of that might not be just totally revamping what was now there. It might even include recommendation to expand it out of the area, look at it. Who knows? Maybe even want to expand it across Chinden and in other words, go south of Chinden in that area. That's a possibility. But that could be part of this consideration of revamping it, in my opinion. And maybe it seems to me it's easier to modify what we have, because it is a really good thing. And I don't want to throw something that's really good away when we could fix it. And in the short term, we can fix it and satisfy the judge from what he said, but then fix it even better. So anyway, that's why I'm sort of thinking of what we ought to do is stick with what the rest of us recommended.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Brown. And I was speaking generally. I actually 100% agree. I'm talking about the eastern half of the city. And I did say that, but it was very general. So to be more specific, I believe, looking at the same map that you referenced, that what I would envision is that the mixed use residential, so the pink along the river in the eastern half of the city, and then the mixed use commercial along Chinden, parallel to that mixed use residential area along the river, is mostly the area that I'd be talking about. So that is the eastern half of the city. So I agree with everything you said. I'm not talking about the whole city, just the eastern half, and in those two comprehensive plan zones. Any other discussion by any of the other commissioners? Okay, well, maybe we try a motion here and see what happens.
Why don't we let Commissioner Wild see what he can come up with?
Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to amend the existing overlay district ordinance for the Sorrel Mitchell Live Work Create district to address the concerns identified and recommend to the city council an amendment to the ordinance. I'm specifically not going to recommend what we talked about, forming a committee. I think that's going to happen whether we recommend it or not. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll second that. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And one nay, that's me. Any discussion further on this? I think I'll just add one other thing. If this were, doesn't matter anymore, but if my idea for a potential motion were to proceed through, I definitely would have included something to fix the code now, because we're obviously at a point where that's got to happen. And I didn't say that in my initial commentary, but of course that would have to happen. But I was looking further down the road with my commentary. So thanks for the great discussion by everybody. And thank you for the presentations over there. We have a recommendation to City Council. And any other discussion on anything else from staff or the commission that we need to talk about? Okay, we are adjourned, and thank you again to the people out there still listening for your testimony tonight.